Let's face it, the holidays can bring up lots of memories. Many of them are wonderful memories. But when you have recently experienced a loss, the holidays can be a difficult time. Today, I'm going to talk about how to get through the holidays when you're still grieving the loss of someone that you loved. Holidays are stressful times, as we know. There are so many things to do, so many people to see. Sometimes we are not even in the same place. We don't live in the same state. We may be hundreds or thousands of miles away from family and friends. Maybe you've taken on a new job, and as exciting as that is, if something happens that it's just not a good time for you to be able to spend time with family and friends, and you're experiencing a holiday where you're alone, that can create sadness. We have to come to grips with the fact that it is okay to feel sad. I'm Sage Hill, and you're listening to the Social Sage podcast. Today, we're talking about dealing with grief during the holidays, and this is going to be a part of a series that I'm doing this month on self-care during the holidays. So let's talk about this grief. I know all too well the feelings that come up during the holiday season, and you don't have to have had to experience loss during the holiday season. Sometimes I think people think that when someone passes and it's on a special day, a special occasion, that makes those occasions all the more difficult. But the truth of the matter is, whenever you experience a loss, those special times when we would have all gathered together can create a level of stress, anxiety, and sadness. How do you deal with this overwhelming surge of grief that you may experience throughout this holiday season? I can remember just the other day having a conversation with my daughter, and she started to reminisce about her grandfather, my father, and I could hear the sadness in her voice. And one of the things that I said to her was that, I understand that sadness, and I understand the sadness and the grief that comes with losing, especially a grandparent. That relationship between grandchildren and their grandparents is such a special bond. They are the ones who are doted over by our parents. Your grandparents are the ones who make everything better. They oftentimes were best friends to their grandchildren. And when you lose a grandparent, that can be very difficult. I think another thing that makes holiday seasons and grieving a little bit more challenging is the fact that we feel lost. The day just doesn't seem the same because the familiar faces, the voices, the sounds, the smells of Christmas seem to change. The day is still the same. The reason for the season still remains. Yet the fact that we are experiencing a change, one that we all knew would happen at some point, but we're never quite ready when it in fact does. So how do you make yourself present during the holidays for those who love you and are looking forward to spending time with you, and reconcile that with your grief. Well, I have some tips for you today that I want to go over to try and help you to cope with your feelings of loss during the holiday. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is making healthy choices. Making healthy choices. Now, yes, we do need to make healthy choices in terms of what we eat and what we drink, what we take into our bodies, because that is all about our physical health. And yes, that is absolutely important. As you will hear me talk about often on this podcast, I do a lot of comparing our physical health with our mental health because they are equal. So just as important as it is to make healthy choices in terms of what we do for our bodies, we also have to make healthy choices for our minds. What do I mean by that? What I mean is this. If you are feeling sad, feel that sadness. And if your grief is becoming overwhelming, then it's time for you to seek out resources, someone to talk to. You can certainly talk with family and friends, and sometimes just being able to have that conversation with someone that has that same memory, has the same memories, has experienced that same loss, just being able to talk with someone else about those feelings that you're having is important. And you need to make sure that the person that you choose or the people that you choose to have this conversation with are people that are going to be empathetic to the way that you feel. Someone that is not going to tell you that you just need to move on, but someone who is going to allow you to speak about your grief and who will hear you when you speak and who can understand how you're feeling. We all go through grieving in different ways. And honestly, within our community, sometimes we have problems with grief and emotions and expressing our emotions. Sometimes we've even had people tell us, like, I can even remember being told at my father's funeral that I needed to be strong and not to cry. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Be strong for your mom. I needed to be strong for me. We can often get pulled into this belief that or mindset that there is something wrong with expressing your feelings. There's nothing wrong with crying. There's nothing wrong with showing your grief and feeling that sadness because those emotions are real. If it was not intended for us to cry, we would not be able to create tears. Sadness and grieving, all of that is a process. And it's not just going to feel better overnight. I know that many of you may want to hear that it's just going to go away and you'll wake up one morning and all of a sudden you'll just never think about that person again or never experience those feelings of sadness again. But I can tell you that 10 years almost after my father's passing, I still think about him almost every day. He will always be an indelible part of me, who I have become as a woman, my thoughts, the memories, the things that he told me, the advice that he gave me. As I navigate my life, I still hear his voice in my head. It's okay to feel those feelings. It's okay to have those thoughts. it's okay to remember. So while you are grieving, make sure that you are making the healthy choice to acknowledge your grief and your emotions and to talk about it. Talk about it with those people that can be empathetic. And if you don't have anyone in your immediate circle who can do that for you, then reach out for help. As you know, I am a huge advocate of utilizing your employee resources and benefits that your employers offer. And that is the Employee Assistance Plan, or known as EAP, wherein you can get X number of sessions, usually 6, for free counseling. And they do have people that specialize in every traumatic event that you could have experienced, including grief counseling. You can also sometimes find grief counselors in your local community, particularly within the church community. The other thing that you can do to help kind of manage the stress and the grief that you may be experiencing from a recent loss during the holidays is to be very mindful of the settings and the situations that you place yourself in. Maybe you're just not quite ready to go back to a place that is going to be very challenging and difficult for you to actually sit in that space, because that was a space that perhaps only you shared with your loved one. I can recall when my father first passed, even when my grandmother passed, that was even more difficult for me. I remember returning to the church that I grew up in. And, we all have our seat, right? In the church, we have our place that we usually sit. And the same was true with my father. The same was true with my grandmother. She was a deacon's wife. And so she sat in a particular seat every Sunday without fail. And I can recall going to church after she passed. And one of the things that I would always do when I would come in, because I never got there right on time, is that I would walk up the stairs, and the doors to from the vestibule, wherein you could actually see inside of the actual congregation, you could see inside the church itself. I could look through this window, and I could look and I could see my grandmother where she would be sitting right on that second row. And I remember going and looking through that window, and my eyes just did what they normally did, which was to scour the room. And the first place that I looked was for her, and she wasn't there. And that was really hard for me. I couldn't stay. I had to leave. I had to remove myself from that situation because the grief was so overwhelming. And then when my father passed, the same thing. I walked into the church, and my eyes immediately went to the choir stand. He sang in the choir, and he wasn't there. Now, this time I was able to go in, but it took time for me to be okay with being in that space. Do you understand what I'm saying? That space that brings back all of those memories. It can be hard. And so you have to do what you need to do in order to be okay. And sometimes that means that you're just not ready to be in that same space. And I'm going to say something that I kind of hesitate to say, but I'm going to say it because we're talking about self-care here today. Even if you have a holiday tradition and you meet in the same place every year for the holidays, and that place is going to remind you so much of the person that you are missing and grieving, if you go and it's just too difficult, it's okay to leave. It's okay. People will understand. And for the ones who don't, you don't need to worry about them anyway. They'll get over it. The other side of that coin, however, is that sometimes we need to sit in our grief, but only we can make that decision. The choice is totally up to you. It's your choice, your self-care. You have to do what's best for you. So we're going to make healthy choices for our mental health as well as our physical health. We are going to refuse to allow ourselves to be placed in situations that are going to bring back too many sad memories for us, or even if the memories are good, if the sadness or the grief becomes overwhelming, we're going to remove ourselves from those situations, and it's okay. The next thing is huge, especially for those of you who are those of us, actually, I'll have to raise my hand to that, who have struggled in the past with people pleasing. It's okay to say no. Self-care sometimes requires us to say no. Whether it's an invitation and you really just don't feel like going and being around a lot of people, maybe you just want to curl up on the couch with a book and a blanket or a good movie, or maybe no noise at all. Maybe you just need some time to yourself. It's okay to say no. That is a very active and important part of practicing self-care and dealing with grief during the holidays. The other thing that I'm going to suggest that you do is to think about the things that you need. Meditation can be extremely helpful. Take time, that quiet time, and just meditate. Take the time to reaffirm yourself. If you have to recite affirmations of encouragement that let you know you're going to make it through this, and you will. Your life has changed forever. When we lose someone that is near and dear to us, that is a permanent change. Yes, they are gone permanently, but we're still here and they're not. And that is a major change, a very major change to have to adapt to and adjust. There are going to be times when you may even want to pick up the phone. I can't even recall the number of times that something happened that I wanted to share. And the first thing that I would normally do would be to pick up the phone and call my parents. And I really wanted to share something with my dad. And I can remember literally picking up the phone and dialing that number. And as soon as I put the phone to my ear, I remembered not there. Those are involuntary kind of reactions that we have because we've spent so much of our life with that or those individuals that sometimes we forget that they're gone. And then when that realization comes to us, that's another hit. It's another moment. It's another reminder that our lives are different now. But those differences don't have to be just negative. Things have changed, yes. But there are so many other moments to be lived and experienced. There are so many people that enjoy you and I and who want to share their time with us. but we have to give ourselves that room to grieve and yet to still be present in the moment. Well, how can I be present in the moment, you may say, if I am just so sad? I'm so sad. I'm missing that person so much. Start new traditions. Start new traditions. It's not going to be the same because they're no longer here. But that doesn't mean that you can't go on and that you cannot create traditions that are more relevant for you in your life now. And even in those new traditions that you create, you can still incorporate remembering the past and having pleasant memories and conversations. You can bring them into these new traditions with you in order that you're still remembering and you still are acknowledging the fact that they were a vital and a very important part of your life. How can you do that? One way that you can do that is by sharing pictures, making collages. So many of us have memory books where we have photos, even Polaroid photos for many of us, that are photos that have been taken over the years and that they are in a photo book that someone has. Why not take those photos and digitize them? Turn them into digital photos. Even if you just use your cell phone to take pictures of them, make sure you get it on that 4K setting. If you have it, set it to 4K and 60 and take photos of the picture, and then take those pictures, upload them to your computer, and you can put together a PowerPoint presentation that you can share during Christmas with everyone. You can add music to it, and not just you have pictures of that individual in lots of different settings with lots of different people. Let me just pause and say this about photos. As we're talking about grief, understandably, sometimes looking at the photos can trigger additional memories and feelings that may cause you to experience a combination of joy and sadness. But don't let that stop you. It's very important to acknowledge your feelings in the moment. Acknowledge your feelings in the moment. That is critically important. And so as I wrap up this first in a series of podcasts wherein we deal with grief during the holiday season, but in general as well, around certain events that typically were times of joy and sharing time with those loved ones that are no longer here. Remember that you are still here. Your life doesn't become less valuable, and it certainly does not end because you have experienced a loss. There are people who love you, who need you, and who want to experience the gift of you. So during this holiday season, as you remember your loved ones, as you remember those who have passed on, remember yourself. Remember the times that you shared with them. And as you look back on those moments, don't look back with regret, because those individuals added something to your life. They brought you joy. They encouraged you. They were your biggest fan and loudest cheerleader. And they loved you. And there are others who are still here, who also mourn their loss. but they also celebrate your presence. This has been Sage Hill with the Social Sage, and as always, it's been a pleasure, my treasures. Enjoy the holiday season and practice self-care as you experience the holidays this year.